Hello, good evening, bienvenue, wherever you are, dear viewer. Um, you're joining me in widescreen. I don't know why I'm in widescreen now, but Google Hangouts has decided that I can be widescreen, which is great. And with me so far is Loretta, our legal department there, and Adam Andrews. Hi, folks. How are we doing?
How you doing?
Doing very well. Let's jump in. Just before we start, we were talking a little bit off camera or a little bit off air about the authorization process and about an audit, I think, that's going on. Loretta, what's the audit that's going on over there?
Well, the Inspector General of the Department of Transportation has oversight responsibilities of the FAA, and they did an audit, I think it was a year ago, on the 333 process, which came out just about when the new regs came out. So they found some issues with regard to the FAA's safety risk assessment process, et cetera, and they've decided to do an audit now of the FAA's waiver process. It doesn't look like they're including the airspace authorization, but the waiver process. I personally think they're going to be looking at whether the FAA, one, has any criteria for issuing the waivers, and two, if it has any oversight of the waivers. I mean, I just think it's unlikely that they're going to look at ways of speeding it up, because that's not usually how the IG works. But
So what do you mean? That I'm a bit lost then. What do you mean by that, Loretta? That's not how they work. What are they looking for then?
well, they usually, well, when you audit someone, especially like the IG, they're looking to find problems, and it's not that difficult to find problems with a understaffed, overstretched organization. So with the 333 process, I mean, there was no safety risk assessment done in the granting of the 333s, and there was no follow-up oversight either. So I think here they're going to be looking at, how does the FAA decide to give out waivers, and what does it do once you've gotten a waiver, to see whether or not you're complying with the waiver that you got.
Can I step you back before I let? I'm sure Adam's got some questions again. Can I just step you back? Did you just say there was no risk assessment done when 333s were granted?
No, I mean, all you have to do is file the paperwork. No one ever looked to see whether you actually had a pilot on your staff. No one looked to see whether you had the ability as an organization to comply with the rules. No, there was absolutely no assessment done at all. I mean, they didn't even look to see if you were a corporation or what your entity was.
Well, what delayed them issuing them, Adam? What do you reckon to that?
Yeah, I used to think I used to be baffled by that too. You'd come across people that had 333s that thought that they got theirs and they didn't need to have a pilot's license. So therefore, because they were granted one, they must not need a pilot's license. I'm like, just read it. They're cookie cutter, but you're applying for certain exemptions from certain things in the FAA regulations, and one of those is you have to be a licensed, sport pilot or higher. People are being granted these and either operating knowingly that they didn't have a license, or not knowing and just not being educated and actually flying without a pilot on their staff or even being one themselves. So yeah, it's kind of a joke. I mean, it's the same situation with the current waiver process in commercial UAS in general. The people that have a lot of experience, that are licensed pilots, that have been flying drones a long time, we have two 333s. All of our pilots are actually 61 pilots and 107. And yet we just want to fly maybe a job that's near an airport, and we've got to go through all these hoops. But a hobbyist can walk into Best Buy and in an hour be in the air, flying in airspace, and really not break any rules. I mean, there are guidelines, there's the AMA, there's, they should notify an airport if they're within 5 miles, but really what's going to happen to them if they don't? Nothing, really, So it's really frustrating, because we've got people that are doing this full time for a business, employing people, and we are being held, to a higher standard, which I get the higher standard because we're commercial operators, but at the same time, we're the ones that know about airspace. We're the ones that know about, ATC and how to talk on the radio and all these different things. And yet we're the ones that are being held back the most.
I'm amazed. So potentially now, will this audit be looking in the 107 process when people are going for those waivers? Because the 107 process is way simpler, way simpler than the 333 if you comply properly, having your pilot's license and all those sort of things. So how do you envisage they're going to check these things, Loretta?
They're just not staffed to do it. And of course, I don't even think that 107 was necessary for the vast majority of drones that are being flown. I mean, if you're flying a Phantom or a Mavic or, really a small drone, I don't really see why you need this whole government bureaucracy just because you're flying commercially. I also don't think we needed model aircraft rules when for years people did fine with voluntary guidelines. And quite honestly, no one that flies as a hobbyist understands that there's Part 101, and they don't understand how to comply with it. If you go to the FAA's website, the FAA doesn't understand the rules. So how do you expect the public to? I think it was just regulatory overkill to appease some people that felt that drones were dangerous, even though there's really no proof of that. And now a lot of commercial operators are going ahead and violating the rules because they see other people doing it, and there's no FAA enforcement. So if you have rules that don't make any sense, and then you don't have any FAA enforcement, you're really encouraging a kind of cowboy attitude. That was around during the 333 days. And people thought with 107, we can get into a more safety regulatory mindset. But with the delays in getting approvals, I'm seeing more and more people saying, well, I don't get the approval, I'm not losing the job, I'm just going to do it, because if I don't, then someone without a certificate is going to do it. And I'm not advocating doing that, but I'm saying that is what happens when you have a regulatory system that makes no sense.
You mentioned the government then, and you invoked Bruce. He popped up for a second, and then he went away again. I don't know what you said to make him go away, but as soon as you said government regulation, he just popped straight up and then ran away again. But it's we'll leave some more ranting because he has a great rant today about all that. Yeah. Well, let's see. Do you think there's going to be a complete reset of the system again after this? How do you see the 107 system at the moment, Andrew? Are you Adam? Sorry, are you loving it, Adam?
It's operating under 107 is fine. I don't mind that. I think it helps you operate because you can actually operate in a lot more airspace than you could as a 333 without a COA. But the airspace authorization thing's a joke. I mean, nobody can wait 90 days, 60 days, 30 days is even too long when we don't get sometimes 3 or 4 days notice to do jobs. Now, granted, all of our work is not in airspace, so that, we can navigate around that. But when you do have something that pops up, and it could be a very good job for a company to do that's experienced and knows how to do it, but yet your hands are tied because you know that either you're not going to ask for enough time and they could deny you, or you're going to have to wait in the queue. We know that it's being done manually right now. We know this new Lance system is coming out, but with it all being done manually right now, you're just sitting there waiting. There's not really any way to know where you're at. And like Loretta said, it just ends up going to somebody who either doesn't know anything about the regulations or who does know but is just willing to ignore them. And in our case, we can't because we have man pilot's licenses. It's not worth it for us to to risk that. And unfortunately we've had competition do the anonymous tip to the FAA on different things that they thought we were doing wrong, or that we were flying an aircraft that wasn't on our exemption, and all that, of course, was found not to be true. But there are people that do actually call. Now, again, the FAA doesn't come kicking in the door and arrest you, but they do, they're going to call and they're going to investigate. And it's not a fun thing to have to deal with. And in my case, knowing that I did nothing wrong, I don't have an issue calling them. I think Loretta even recommended, maybe talking to your lawyer first and things like that. I don't want to misspeak, but in my case, I felt like, I'm not going to wait. The guy left the message. I'm going to call him right back and answer his questions, because I knew I did nothing wrong. So, and in the case that was what was found, and they have to do their due diligence, and it's an automated. It's kind of like the Secret Service. Someone makes a report, they got to follow up on it. Same thing with the anonymous tip line. No matter how crazy it may sound, if somebody makes a report, they have to follow up on it. But the problem is, unless somebody was there with a camera taking a picture of you with your tail number and you doing something crazy, even that's hard to prove. So all they can really do is educate. But it doesn't make it fun for you to have to deal with that if you're trying to run a business and you're worried about your pilot's license and everything else. So
the only thing I would say as a lawyer is that I think 99% of the cases that the FAA did file were all made out on the admissions of the people that were being investigated. And a lot of the large dollar cases and the emergency cases, et cetera, were all made on the backs of admissions by the people. So it really is. I know people don't want to spend the money calling lawyers and stuff, but you do need to think sometimes you get away with calling and you're okay, but other times you may unwittingly be making admissions. So hopefully, actually, if you belong to AOPA, you should have access to their legal services plan, which is, a good plan, and you can use it for drones.
Okay, it's good to know.
And similarly, you could be a member of the drone user group and have similar. Is that in place now, Loretta, with the drone user group?
No, we talked about doing that, but that's not in place. But since he flies manned aircraft, I thought it was a pretty high chance that he was an AOPA member.
Yeah, and that's a pretty good thing. And now, Adam, I think you're just back from a g'day, Bruce. I think you're just back from a bit of a tour, aren't you? And you've had sort of issues with your equipment on tour, I think, haven't you?
We didn't have too many issues on the tour, but you're talking about the geo system and that. Yeah, it's one of these things. And again, we've talked about all the FAA hurdles that you have to go through. The last thing you want to deal with is getting through all of that to find out that the aircraft you paid $10,000 for won't take off. I mean, that's ridiculous. And yes, they do have an unlock process, and it's not an instant thing. It's something that there are certain areas, and I'm sure you guys all know, but there's certain areas you can self-unlock. The yellow zones, the red zones have to be done through their new online process. Prior to that, it was more of an email exchange, more of a paperwork type situation. Now it's actually somewhat automated in that you select your aircraft, you put a pin on the map, and it puts the lat long for you, because that used to be a way that they would deny them in that you didn't have the right lat long configuration. So now they actually fill that in. You then expand the radius. I think you can go up to 30,000 meters or something like that. Or kilometers, maybe it is. But the thing with it is there's still a delay in getting the approval. In my case, I did it exactly by the book. We were trying to unlock a P4 and an Inspire 2. We did it, within the guidelines. We put the date in there. We put the serial numbers in. Hit submit. Got an email saying it was submitted, and 1 minute later, rejected. And no reason why it was rejected. So I tried it a couple different ways. I happened to be in a forum, and Brendan Schulman was in there, and we pinged it off of him. He took a look at it. He couldn't figure it out. He sent it up the chain, and about over the weekend, this last weekend, it just miraculously unlocked. So I don't know what happened or what didn't happen, but in that case, it did work. But unfortunately, right now, we also fly an M600, and that, because of current firmware, is not able to be unlocked. So it's extremely frustrating when you have equipment that is very expensive, built for professional use, and you're extremely restricted on how you use it. You know, I'm all for, I think every Phantom out of the box should have a lock on it of some kind, because I think that would eliminate a lot of people flying into airports who don't have any idea what they're doing, limit it to 400 feet, whatever. Keep them somewhat restricted. Maybe have a different process for hobbyists to expand that lock. But for commercial operators, and especially pilots, and I'm talking Part 61 pilots, because 107, again, we have people that just passed their test yesterday, and then they're posting, can I fly here? You know, and they don't understand a sectional chart. So I'm specifically talking about manned aircraft pilots, whether that be 333 operators, or someone that can prove they have a pilot's license that's current. There should be no reason that my aircraft should be locked in any fashion for any amount of time, because also these unlocks only last up to 3 months. Then you got to redo it again. So if you have 5 or 6 or 7 aircraft and you have, you know, several airports in your area, that's several different applications you have to make, because each one is a separate application. So, and I actually, when the M200 was released, or the announcement came out, one of the first questions I had for their, you know, their commercial division was, is this going to have the same geo, you know, lock system in it? And they said yes. So that's a huge, like, put the brakes on moment for me with, you know, the M200, because it looks like it's going to be a great aircraft. It's weather resistant, long flight time, you know, all the redundancies, but I just don't know if I can invest that kind of cash in an aircraft that could be locked at any time. And we do search and rescue. So if I'm out, I get called out from a police department in the evening, how am I going to get an unlock done if it happens to be in airspace? I mean, yeah, I can get approval through an emergency, you know, airspace system to fly there legally, but I can't even make my aircraft fly because DJI hasn't locked down. So that's a real kind of sore subject with me with the GeoLock system. For, you know, approved operators who not only have pilot's licenses but have, you know, COAs for airports, and I can fly at the airport if I want to, but my aircraft won't take off. And the other problem with that is, even when it can be unlocked, that's only within the Go app. So 80% of the flying I do is in a third-party app, you know, a mapping software. So if I jump into my mapping software, but the flight controller thinks it's in a no lock zone or a lock zone, then I've got a conflict there too. So it creates an issue where you're not quite sure if your aircraft is going to be 100% reliable.
Yeah, there's I want to write an article, and it's about manned aviation, and it's there's an investigation going on at the moment, so I'm parking it until that's complete. But the provision of mapping services and stuff to aviation end users is a very, very important thing. And I have to wonder how, well, we know why DJI have put these restrictions in to stop people doing crazy things, but how can they do that on one hand, and then on the other hand have advertising that says fly your Mavic up to 7 kilometers or whatever it is? So the direct juxtaposition of all the restrictions, and I think you're right. I think if you are oh dear, I'm going to wear that. I'm a manned pilot as well, so I should be able to fly wherever I like. Yeah, that's bad, isn't it? But yeah, no, there's definitely levels of qualification, and DJI aren't really the people to on DJI bashing, aren't they? They're not really the people to put that in place. They make great machines, and that's half the trouble, isn't it? They can get the job done.
And I don't think hobbyists are going to be buying a $16,000 quadcopter for their first quadcopter. So the people that are buying those are going to be industrial inspection people, fire departments, police departments, people that, you know, hopefully have had some training of some sort or are already commercial operators. So you would think that as you get into the more professional grade systems, there would be a more robust way for, you know, us to actually keep them unlocked. And it could easily be done with a unique serial number that only is going to only work on my aircraft. I can't share it on Facebook or something. It's only going to work on mine. You know, if I sell the craft, I don't want the liability of that. So I'm going to notify DJI and say, hey, I sold that, shut her off, you know, boom, and then that serial number comes out of there, and it's back to locked again. But I don't know their thinking behind it. I mean, the answer we always get is, well, we couldn't sell these aircraft in some countries if we didn't have this lock system there. Well, how does Autel and well, 3DR, they're not really around much anymore. But these other companies, Unique, their aircraft aren't locked down like DJI, and they're selling them, and they're probably all made in the same place. So, don't know.
Well, yes, yes, or within the same 200 meters or something.
Right.
Yes, if you look out that window over there, you can see the whatever factory. Absolutely. Bruce, let's bring you in on this geofencing, and all that sort of thing. In fact, let me bring up a picture as we do that, because you had a really good rant this morning, and where did that picture go? Present to everyone, and it was in Auckland, on your side of the world. A DJI something we believe did end up auto landing itself. I guess, is it on that bridge? Is that on the number 1 to the north there? Would that be where it is there,
Yep.
Bruce? Yeah,
That's right. That's State Highway 1. It's the main route through New Zealand, goes from one end of the country to the other. And the Auckland Harbour Bridge connects basically the city is divided in half. So the Harbour Bridge is a very busy roadway. They originally built it, I think, with 4 lanes, and then they had to spend a lot of money and add extra lanes on. So yeah, at peak traffic times, it is really bumper to bumper traffic.
and that was some sort of geofence or auto land thing, although I knew, and I just shared the DJI Geo map, and as you can see, there was no airspace, there were no restrictions on that map at all for Auckland, according to DJI.
That's interesting because there are a number of restrictions around Auckland. There's a few holes in them, but there are some no-fly areas. And this geofencing thing, it doesn't sync with the regulations, because at the airport from where I fly, it gives us a 1 kilometre circle around the airport. But the legal requirements are you can't fly within 4 kilometres. So all this does effectively, it means that people can't fly in the middle of the runway, but they can go to the ends and fly. And the ends are the most dangerous parts. That's where the planes are actually departing and taking and landing. So it actually is contrary to safety. It doesn't do anything practical, but it gets in the way of a lot of people.
And so that the chap that landed on the bridge, they slapped a fine on him.
Yeah, interesting situation actually, because I've been lobbying CAA for over a year now to include. They've got a little safety brochure, it tells you what you can and can't do. It's all easygoing, simple reading. And I've said to them, please, looking at YouTube, most of the problems you've got are caused by tourists to this country. Just include that brochure in the immigration pack that every visitor to New Zealand gets, which says you can't bring in food items and you can't do this and you can't do the other. Just include the drone brochure. It's not going to cost you much, but it's going to educate the massive people who are causing the problems. And they have not done it. And I noticed that news report only came after an Official Information Act request. They didn't actually give this information up willingly. It had to be requested by an Official Information Act request before they'd actually divulge, yes, a tourist was fined $500 for breaking the rules, because it adds weight to my argument. And they're basically, what are they doing? Why aren't they just taking the simple steps? It's more like, we'd rather let people break the rules and earn a bit of money than actually inform them and protect the public safety.
Yeah, it's what do you think's got to happen with geofencing and all that sort of thing? Should it be as it is in the manned world, that you're trained enough and you know where the controlled airspace is and you know what a congested area is, or should the manufacturers be forced to bring in more control? How's this going to end up?
Well, I think, like I said before, I think I'm all right with the hobbyists, the drones that are marketed to hobbyists, to the first-time flyers, having some restrictions built into them. Whether those are overridable or not, that's a different thing. But again, for commercial operators, and the thing is too, a lot of people get this confused. New drone pilots, they go out and buy these and they say, well, my DJI app said this, so I'm legal, or my no-fly zone app said this, and those are not sectional charts. Those are, you can take the slider in any of those apps, whether you use UAV Forecast or Drone Buddy, and slide them all the way down and turn off heliports, and your map looks nice and clear. So those are not sectional charts. And if you don't know how to read those, then you should have some limitations put on those drones, But again, for commercial operators, licensed pilots that know how to read, sectional charts, that know how to navigate the airspace in a manned aircraft, that also have approvals from airports, that should be something that should be unlockable for those operators.
Yeah,
Little
there's
bit at
actually
least.
something called safe harbor. I'm sure Loretta knows about safe harbor, where an organization that could control something but doesn't because it's not practical is indemnified against liability. Your internet service provider is like this. If you use the ISP to surf for child porn, even though the child porn travels through their servers, they're not responsible because they have no reasonable expectation that they could monitor all the traffic. Now, if a ISP starts monitoring the traffic and filtering it and saying this is illegal, this isn't, then they can lose their safe harbor provision, which means because they have chosen to do that, they are giving up the right to be indemnified against that sort of thing happening. Now, surely if DJI is telling people where they can and can't fly, they should lose their safe harbor provision under the law, and therefore they become responsible when someone flies illegally because they could have stopped them. But for whatever reason, if their app lets them fly there, they have allowed them to fly there, so there must be some burden of responsibility. Are you familiar with that concept, Loretta?
Well, I'm familiar with the concept with regard to the internet. I don't think it applies to a consumer good. I mean, it's an interesting argument, though, if someone is injured and because the geofencing technology didn't work, then it's possible you would have a product liability case. But I don't know how the laws are going to work out with drone-specific kinds of issues in terms of negligence and things like that. We just don't have enough cases. But I think some of that will be resolved when there's standards for identifying drones and standards for sense and avoid, because that's a lot of the issue. I do take exception to someone flying a drone having to be a commercial pilot and reading the sectional chart. So while reading sectionals can certainly be helpful, I don't think you need that to be able to fly a drone safely. And quite honestly, when you're talking about a lot of these small drones, and under 10 pounds, which most of them are, and most of them are under 5 pounds, I think having that level of knowledge is really above and beyond what you need to fly safely. And you see people know absolutely nothing that are flying out there, and we have almost no injuries or problems, which doesn't mean something couldn't happen, but we have, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of these drones out there, and things are really not happening. So, I mean, there is a certain level of stupidity out there, but, there's also a certain level of, people caring that they not crash into airplanes and things like that. So.
No, you're right. You're bob and right. And Bruce made that very point today. There is no great body of evidence of crashes and doom and destruction and all that sort of thing. So perhaps my idea of sectionals and that, perhaps it is elitist, and perhaps it is the wrong way of thinking now. And a new head needs to go onto the shoulders of aviation authorities when they're considering these things. And I've said it before, perhaps even drones, especially the smaller ones, should be removed from the remit of aviation authorities altogether. There are plenty of laws on the books. If you fly it through a window, Mrs. Miggins' greenhouse, that's always been my analogy. You got to worry when you fly through some old lady's greenhouse and she complains, because she'll be a major powerhouse at getting something done about it, rather than an airline or something like that. So maybe it's time for a radical sea change on the way things are thought about. I've ranted a bit. I'm going to ask Bruce what he reckons to that rant.
Yeah, I think we have to stop regulating toys for a start. The 250-gram limit is fairly common across the world, except in New Zealand, of course, where we regulate paper airplanes. But there has to be some kind of stratification based on risk. And we've got the experience now. We've got years and years of experience, which shows that these sub 2 kg drones are not really a risk. There's been no death. There's been no significant or severe injury. I know someone in Seattle went to jail for hitting someone with the drone, but the woman wasn't that badly injured, I understand. And I mean, every day we've got people being injured, even dying from dog bites and things. Risk is a part of life. If we try and eliminate all risks, we sit around in a foam padded room and do nothing. We have to have some common sense, reasonable attitude to managing the risk. We can't eliminate the risk. We manage the risk. And we've got to balance up the benefits to the disadvantages. We allow people to drive cars 30,000 people are killed on the roads in the USA every year, but we accept that risk because the benefits of driving a vehicle outweigh the personal individual risk. And at the moment, we've got this regulation by hysteria where the regulators are trying to eliminate all the risk. And they do that by making ridiculously restrictive regulations when they just need to manage it. They need to keep it to an acceptable level. And this is difficult for them because the media has driven this hysteria where as soon as someone sees a drone, they feel their life's in danger or people are going to get killed. As I said in my latest blog, as individuals, there's no concerted central body, as I mentioned last week. We don't have this representative body. So we have to take the responsibility as individuals. And when there's a story in the paper that says, you know, this plane had a close encounter with a drone at 20,000 feet, we've just got to say, that's not right. And let it to the editor, comment on the story, try and educate the public, because otherwise they're only hearing one side of the story. So it's an individual responsibility now. And I wouldn't want to be a regulator, but I do think they could lift their game a hell of a lot better than they have.
Absolutely. And then to speak to Adam, the thoughts of geozones and stuff like that are influencing your buying decisions as a commercial operator now.
Well, definitely. I think you feel like you're in a little bit of a rock and hard place because we like the integrated, you know, video and long range flight systems and you know, the batteries and all the technology they've come up with. You know, they've got everybody beat in that respect. And our only option is really to build our own and put a more of an open source flight controller in it. But then you lose a lot of that functionality that we've grown to like. So, but at the same time, you don't want to necessarily shell out $15,000 for an aircraft that may not work 100% of the time. So it's a tough spot to be in. It's just a frustrating spot. And you wish somebody at DJI would maybe listen to the commercial operators of the world that are being restricted from working because their equipment won't allow us to, and we're allowed to be in those areas.
Don't you think this opens up the doors? I mean, this is a capitalist world. Most countries are capitalist. Surely this is an opportunity for someone to come in, make something every bit as good as the DJI product, and turn off the geofencing. And then they would own the market that you're in because that's exactly the product you want.
I agree. And there are some companies out there. There's no doubt.
The Aztec gift that's now Intel, that doesn't have all this on it. And I suppose we're running back to what you said earlier, by not having the geofencing, perhaps manufacturer is putting the untoward flights all in the hands of the end user. They're accepting no responsibility for dodgy flights in any way.
It's the GIC's responsibility anyway, so it doesn't matter who owns it, bought it. It's the guy flying it that's going to be in trouble. So
it is.
And any of the geolocks they currently have, you're checking the box saying that you acknowledge that you are in this, whatever it is, this zone or this airspace or this warning area. So they have disclaimers in their own software saying you're taking ownership of what you're doing. So, you know, it's not like the onus is still on them with any of these unlocks. It's just unlock it permanently. I don't want to have to be in my busy season in the summer and remind myself every 3 months that I've got to go back for all my aircraft and request unlocks for every airport that I operate around or through or by or whatever.
And at the end of this could be your whole process from the FAA, couldn't it? Really, it doesn't need to touch DJI at all because you're doing it twice, aren't you? Perhaps in some areas you're looking for an exemption and then you're getting it done there. It should be one process, and I'm sure DJI could afford to pay for that. They could fund the FAA to sort that system out. I'm sure they could. Well, there's another business opportunity, isn't it? If you're the company that does that, you've stitched the market up, haven't you, in whatever country you're in? I don't know. It's luckily where I am, there are none and no restrictions for miles. So I've never had to use the system, so I have no idea what it entails. But I do look at the different zones on the maps around the world, and my principal worry is that they don't seem to be mapped to aviation standards, and there's no consistency, as you've mentioned there, Adam, between the different apps. And you're quite right. People in the manned aviation world, you ring around all the weather forecasters you can find until one of them tells you the weather you need to get the flight done. I've so many people I've watched do that, ring different forecasts.
there's been many cases where the the DJI no-fly zones that are built into the system have not included Class D and C airports, but included an airport, a little grass strip, and some farmer's yard that hasn't been used in years. So there's inconsistencies there too, that have kept people from flying, but then allowed people to fly where it's even more dangerous to fly, or the potential is higher. I shouldn't say it's dangerous, but there's more risk flying around a Class C airport than there is around a some cornfield in the middle of Wisconsin. So
yeah. So we're quite lucky in the unmanned or remotely piloted world in that perhaps our life isn't quite so much at risk. So the aeronautical data is not quite so important, but it should be at the same high standard as the aviation or regulators authorities data. And I personally think all the data used in all the apps should only come from your respective aviation authority, because that's the definitive data. That's it. There's no, and I know people don't use that know before you fly app over there, because it does have every corn strip airfield in the world, and so
not only that, but it keeps your data. Why would you want the government to have access to your data? I looked at the Privacy Act notice on that, and even though they claim they're not going to use it, the Privacy Act notice indicates that they could. They have access to it. So you've got to be nuts to use a government app that keeps your data on where you fly. Why on earth would you do that?
And to what Loretta's saying, if you look at what the data that DJI collects, I mean, we could talk about privacy and security issues all day long with the internet and everything else, and we've done videos on our vlog about it. But between recording your flight, capturing photos, now they record audio if you have that turned on, and by default, when you update the Go app, down there in the other settings, it actually records the audio. When you're standing there with your controller flying, you're capturing what you were saying while it's capturing the high resolution images, and it's all uploading to the cloud in China somewhere. So what's being done with all that data,
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It totally makes me nervous too. And I think it's all subject to being subpoenaed if somebody wants it, or of course, being used however it is someone decides to use it. So yeah, now it is a real concern for a lot of people.
I'm very interested that you've brought that up, Loretta, because you've not mentioned that before, and obviously you've been talking about it with grown-ups. It's obviously a topic of conversation, that know before you fly app. So I wish to hear more. What would the FAA you've told us that FAA are understaffed. Surely you haven't got enough time to bother looking at your data.
Well, but first of all, you don't know what they're going to decide to do one day, but then too, if they're investigating you, it's very possible that they could decide to use that data. And even if they ended up issuing a subpoena to you or to wherever the repository is, they would still have access. It's still being kept. So
before you fly app doesn't indicate what aircraft you're flying. It just indicates, because being overseas, I can't. It's another thing I can't see, because they won't let me download it and look. But it doesn't log your aircraft and your actual flight. It just logs you looking at an area in which you might fly, doesn't it?
Well, I did not download the app because I didn't want it on my I did look at it a few phones ago when it first came out, and the feedback was so bad, and I looked at the fact that they were keeping the data. So what data they have exactly, I do believe it's identifiable to the person flying it. I mean, at least the person who logs into it. So, but I'm not the expert in what they keep and how they keep it. I just know that there is data that they have access to.
I think I'm sure Bruce would like to chip in as well. But Adam had a very fair point about the DJI stuff, and I know a lot of people are showing a little bit of concern about just how often, not only DJI, a couple of other companies as well, that their products do talk to the internet and they phone home, and it's not quite sure what they're saying when they phone home.
That's also becoming kind of an issue with government contracts too. If you're doing any work for, DOT departments and things like that, a lot of them have either been instructed or told that products built in China and that there's restrictions on that. So I don't know what drone. There's not very many drones you're going to fly that don't have some component from there, but that's another downfall to that unfortunately DJI being the largest drone manufacturer that people know of. That's going to be something too that could also be a hindrance. You get past the FAA, you get past the geofence, and now you've got what you think is the leading state-of-the-art drone, only to find out that that contract you were going to get won't allow a product built in China. So
it's a bit of a checklist forming, isn't it?
Sure is.
For your purchasing decisions. That's very interesting. G'day, Gene. How you going?
Fine, sir. Sorry I'm late. We were out doing some flying.
And I have been to do today as well, hence the red nose. This is not my Christmas look. This is I've been almost crashing things as well today, look. On a lovely autumn afternoon here. We've had our first frosts down here in Africa for this year. We were just talking about privacy and DJI and know before you fly up and all that sort of thing, and I didn't realize it had come up quite so hard on Loretta's radar, so we're gonna have to quiz her off air and see what else she knows about that. Have you seen, Adam, the M200? You mentioned it briefly earlier, and I think you've had your hands on it, haven't you?
No, I have not. I've seen it demoed several times on the internet, but now I haven't seen one in person. It looks very promising for the things that we use it for. I mean, the RTK, the weather resistance, the compact portability, the heated battery. I mean, it's got a lot of neat features, but again, until we can get past some of these other hurdles, or at least have some kind of an idea that they may change or they may make the unlock process easier to work with, it's going to be tough to invest in a product that costs that much, that's designed to carry $10,000 sensors like the FLIR and the 30 times zoom cameras. Those are $8,000 and $10,000, $12,000 cameras on the bottom of a potentially $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 copter, only to find out that it doesn't fly where you need it to. So that's going to be a hard pill to swallow if that's the case.
Gene, have you come up against many problems with DJI's Geo system, unlocking areas and things like that when you got to go operate?
Well, when they first started it, we did. If there was a TFR up, we immediately got locked out. It was interesting because of that horrific balloon crash that we had over here last summer. I got out there and flew the mission just before they put the TFR up. And the National Transportation Safety Board guys came out there with their, I think it was a DJI Inspire, and sure enough, they got locked out, and they were out there trying to investigate the crash, and they couldn't get it done. So, yeah, we've run into a couple of bumps with that, and I got to agree that you're not going to spend that much money until you're going to be able to, especially for public safety, because we're always flying in those areas where a lot of people shouldn't be flying, but that's kind of our lot in life.
And one thing, Gene, I'd mentioned about that, the TFR. So if you think about it, how does that TFR information get to our aircraft that have already been updated, previously, unless you're using a mobile device that has internet connection? And if it does, I believe, and I'd have to test this, but there is a section in the Go app that allows you to turn off that Geo, that it's essentially a live connection. So if you have that enabled, things that pop up like TFRs and other airspace restrictions get pushed to your mobile device and essentially warn you or lock it down. But if you don't have that turned on, I don't know how the aircraft would get locked out unless you have firmware that was just released that's locking out an airport's location. And from what I've been told from Brendan, Schulman from DJI, after going through this last Geo unlock situation, that TFRs are supposed to be something that is pilot unlockable. So maybe there's been a change there. But I'd look at that Geo system. If you still operate any DJI aircraft, there is an actual slider bar that allows you, and it tells you a little description of what it can do. But I think if you turn that off, you won't get hindered by those push type notifications. Only the firmware no-fly zones that are embedded in the flight controller.
Yeah, we haven't had any issues, since that time. And yeah, we have done that. But as I understand it, in the M200, that's kind of endemic to the system, isn't it?
As far as what? Which part?
The geofence part.
Well, yeah, I think from what I understood when that was first released, that it was coming out, we contacted them about that, and I wondered, as a commercial bird that they're pushing us towards, is that going to have the same geo lock system? And they said it will. So, it should be no different than a Phantom 4, Inspire 2, whatever. So, for us, that's the problem. We were talking about that before you joined, is that, especially in search and rescue, it's one thing if I have a job next Friday and it's in Class D and I've already got a waiver for the Class D and all I need is the unlock. But it's a different thing if I get called out tonight at 7 o'clock at night and it happens to be in airspace. I'm screwed. I can't unlock it any faster when it's the next day in China or it's, middle of the night or whatever. So that's the hard part when you have, manned pilots flying commercial aircraft that are supposed to be commercial, and we can't even unlock their aircraft. We have to go to them and rely on a different country to decide where it's safe for us to fly.
I suppose this is it's a teething problem, isn't it? Really, this is a modern problem. This is a 5-year-old problem that a small aircraft is going to be taken out the back of a car in an emergency situation and start operating. This didn't happen before. This would have been a helicopter with a man in it, chugging in, talking on the wireless all the way, and it would all have got.
10 years ago. Come on.
Oh, well, you know what I mean. You know what I mean, Gene. You know what I mean. You're so picky, Gene. So picky. You know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, it's a new situation, isn't it? And yeah, straight away you think, well, if you've got an unlock team, then they should be in the country that's the unlocking event's happening. There should be an hours 24 team, whoever they are, and you can string out what you actually need to make it happen. It should be that local air traffic controller should be able to press a button that says, yeah, that identifiable drone XYZ can now do ABC or whatever. It shouldn't be going, as you said, Adam, it shouldn't be diving off to another country at a different time zone and all that sort of thing. But it's a teething problem, and I suppose you have to hand it to DJI that at least they're trying. At least they're part of the process to whatever the next world view is going to look like when this all rolls out. But Gene, you're going to be talking about all of this in relation to search and rescue and that sort of thing at our expo, which is coming up very soon indeed.
Yes, indeed. We are going to be talking about that and many other things at the expo as well. I'll be going there with my business partner, John Buell, who is a 20-year law enforcement officer. And he'll be combining his experience with mine, and we are going to be telling tales and giving instruction and hopefully giving some guidance to folks who want to get off into this in a very serious way for public safety.
Is the search and rescue field, for want of a better word, growing up in America now with unmanned aircraft?
Oh, it certainly is. More and more, we have over here. We have a number of nonprofit groups. I say a number. There's a rather large number of volunteer groups that act as adjuncts to the search and rescue teams that are commissioned officers. And these folks go out and they raise money. They have fundraisers and they buy equipment and do some pretty significant work within the search and rescue community. So these aircraft have really caught on pretty quick, and everyone in the search industry sees them as a very beneficial tool. And the benefit far outweighs the risk.
Yeah, well, that's cyclical. I think every single week now we come back around to show us the bodies, show us the carnage. I think it's becoming a. I need to write it on this door, don't I? Show us the carnage, or something like that, because
Yeah.
it's still not coming, and definitely the benefit does outweigh the risk in that regard. So I'm seeing a lot on Facebook now. People saying I'm a fireman and I want to operate. I want to operate a quad over there. Do I need a Part 107? What's the definitive answer on that?
Yeah, you actually you do. And there are two ways to do it with either a public aircraft or a private aircraft. And if you're going to be flying private, then you got to do it under Part 107. It's considered an official operation, and it is not commercial. I mean, it's not recreational. Excuse me. Now, if you want to do it under a COA, a certificate of authorization, there are restrictions as to the type of missions that you can fly. And a COA will allow you to fly in restricted airspace because you've already given your safety case for it, and the FAA has approved it. But by the same token, you're restricted to the number of or the type of public safety missions you can fly. So if they have a career day at the middle school, the sheriff can't say, "Why don't you take your drone down there and fly it for the career day?" No, that's not a public safety mission, so you can't do it. But you can fly that same career day mission under Part 107. So differences, and we're recommending to any of the agencies that we've been training to go ahead and get you guys 107 certified, and then we put them through our training program, and then go ahead and get the COA, because 9 times out of 10 you're going to be able to operate under the 107 unless you have really, really complicated airspace. So yeah, go get your 107. You can start flying, and if you have the complicated airspace, you wait the 8 months to get the COA.
Yeah, well, what we've also been recommending is that they speak to their legal counsel, because when you're flying 107 as a civil aircraft, you have to make sure if you care, or at least you knowingly waive any possible immunity that you have, which would include qualified immunity for police officers. So it's a consideration for people not to forget that that could be a huge liability issue, personally or for the organization, if there's different liability requirements for a governmental aircraft as opposed to a civil aircraft.
Just wind that back for me and explain qualified immunity.
Well, under different circumstances, for example, a police officer may do something that is contrary to the law, but under certain circumstances, they're still not going to be what they did because of qualified immunity. So I don't know what the answer is, and of course the answer will vary by jurisdiction, but it's just something for people to consider, that there are ramifications to declaring an operation as civil operation. So and it may be that people don't get that liability, but they should at least find out. So
by that, do you mean you would, for argument's sake, to save a life, you have to break another law, but you end up saving a life, you wouldn't get done for whatever that law was you broke? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, no, it's usually in the case of, let's say, an arrest where everything's not, necessarily legal, or, different circumstances where maybe you're on a chase and you're violating procedures and the law. So basically, it's a form of protection from liability that you would have under certain circumstances that you wouldn't have necessarily under others. So it's just something that people, consider. It's just another factor.
Okay. Cool. All right. I think we're marching towards the top of the hour here. So I will throw the floor open has anyone seen anything else this week that has caught their eye that they'd like to talk about? might be very short.
So many different things. I mean, we're talking swarms now, and the hive mind, and learning that the Navy came out with their motley crew concept. I don't know if you saw that. The motley crew is a swarm technology that they're embracing, and now we're looking at deterrence. I mean, people are starting to take a really close look at drone countermeasures.
Oh yes, I was. There were 3 stories. How did I do that? There was 3 stories in a row this week that I posted. That was all drone deterrent and doom and gloom. There must have been a conference on somewhere about it. But yeah, all of them were shooting down and how nasty they are and all that sort of thing. So there's definitely money being made in the anti-drone sphere. Very much so.
Well, it's starting to percolate up to the top. And, the smart people have finally gotten smart and said, we need to do something about this. So that's why you see more and more of these stories about drone countermeasures, because, quite frankly, if you have 25 Mavics that are coming at you with a quarter pound of methyl ethyl death, you're going to have a hard time stopping all 25 of those. And it's got some folks worried. And I think, did you see just a couple of weeks ago that the Navy just launched 60 wings at once? Did you see that?
Yeah,
that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was Pixhawk as well. That's been yes, it was. Yeah, it was Pixhawk. No, swarms are coming. I mean, it makes sense, doesn't it? You can have your 20 Mavics could map a huge area or a building or whatever, and every little detail, you go up the top right, you go down the bottom left, you do the trees out the back, and all do it within, let's say, the same 20-minute time frame. So if you have 3 doing it for 20 minutes, you're getting an hour's work done in that same 20-minute slot. So I mean, yeah, it absolutely makes sense for the way it's going to go. And then it's just how many aircraft can a single person command, isn't it? That's what that's going to bring into the equation. But already the FAA are issuing waivers for large formations. We had the guys on the other week with their aerial displays with the lights and Disney and things like that. So it's coming. And search and rescue, I mean, that would be, I should imagine, fantastic to have 10 aircraft coordinating in an area. Be fantastic. Yeah. So yes, we'll keep watching swarms. Tail sitters seem to be coming. Solo aircraft seem to be coming a lot now. As seems to be quite a few trends. Have you seen anything, Bruce? You've got your microphone off.
Yeah, no. I was just thinking, this anti-drone technology. I did my DIY cruise missile project back in 2002, something like that, and I had some chats with people from DARPA at the time, and they were aware of the threat of low-cost unmanned cruise missile offensive weapons, and they were quite concerned about it back then. But apparently, nobody further up the chain would listen to them. It's interesting that now it's come around and it's being acknowledged as a real threat. And it's not so much a threat from the ability to kill people and destroy property. It's the fact that, let's take North Korea for example. Perfect opportunity. They could build a whole bunch of really low-cost cruise missiles, thousands of them, tens of thousands of them, and for the USA to take them out would cost 10 to 50 times as much per missile as it cost to build them. So you could bankrupt America if you throw enough cheap missiles at it by using off-the-shelf drone technology. And I guess that's an issue. Because all this costs money. But I think really, honestly, the terrorists are not stupid. They've realised it's a hell of a lot easier, cheaper, and more effective to load a truck up with unexploded munitions and drive it into a suitable spot and detonate it with a suicide bomber. So I wonder if we're trying to find a solution to a problem that doesn't exist.
Yeah, I think you're right.
The act of terrorism is not so much the destruction part of it, it is the psychological part of it.
Yeah, exactly. Terror is the key word.
Yeah, I think we should drive this to fairies and fluffy stories and bunnies and Easter bunnies. Although we have a big Easter bunny story in America. Anyway, moving on very swiftly. No, in a lot of ways it's a terrible world. I've resisted reporting too much of all the stuff. You see the dog here. The dog wants to go out. So that's the clue, isn't it? That's the clue that the time's up. The dog is mithering me. So, Adam, before we go, remind everybody where can they find your channel on the internet?
If you just search for Arrowworks or Arrowworks Productions, you'll see our logo, and we're on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and that's the same name, our same website, arrowworksproductions.com.
And all those good things. And of course, Bruce is RC Model Reviews. And that other channel, what's that other channel, Bruce?
XJet.
XJet, that's the one. That's the one. Something to do with jets, isn't it? And Gene is, are you still hanging out RP Search Services and things like that?
Oh, yeah. RP Search Services is alive and well.
And Loretta will find, sorry, Gene, go away. Sorry, and Loretta will find you at Vaughan. At Vaughan teaching students. And we must have some of your students on Monday and hear their opinions of the world. So guys, thanks, and ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us again this week. Yeah, I was supposed to say subscribe and all those sort of things. So subscribe and all those sort of things that you're supposed to do down over there somewhere. And we'll be doing this again, 2100 GMT, Tuesday nights, same bat time, same bat channel. I'll bid everyone farewell.
Ciao, ciao.
Cheers, everyone. Thanks, Bye.